Did the United States commit genocide against Native Americans? It's a controversial question that still plagues the United States. In 4 centuries, the indigenous population has shrunk from around 3 to 7 million to just 250,000. War, massacre, deportation, rape, epidemia, stolen, confiscated, and plundered land, all with the blessing of the White House? That's what we're going to try and find out in the chapters of this video. So get comfortable and let's see together what really happened over the centuries in this great and beautiful country. Subscribe to encourage me to invest even more time and share even more videos for the community. Like and don't forget to leave us your opinion in the comment bar. It's a pleasure. Enjoy your viewing. In the 18th century, the British Crown colonized part of America's East Coast, establishing 13 colonies. While some tribes traded, notably in furs, they also formed alliances with the colonial powers, who took advantage of tribal rivalries to establish themselves permanently in America. English colonists in particular despised the culture and way of life of these tribes, which they considered backward. At the time, some 1 million settlers lived mainly in the 13 colonies. The native tribes with whom the colonists were in contact lived in an area stretching from the Appalachians to the Great Lakes and the Mississippi River. But one event changed everything. In 1776, the 13 British colonies declared their independence. This marked the beginning of the American Revolution, which culminated in the creation of a new country, the United States. When the Americans gained their independence, they took back not only the 13 colonies, but also all the territories in which their tribes lived. And they had no intention of leaving them. The U.S. government considers all the land stretching to the Mississippi River as its own, regardless of the many tribes who have lived there for generations. In response, in 1785 several tribes, including the Shawanoes, Menominee, Creeks, and Mississaugas, formed a coalition demanding that control of these lands be ceded to them and that white settlement be prohibited. Unsurprisingly, the U.S. government refused, sent in the army, and started the first war between the young United States and the Native Americans, who were defeated in 1794 at the Battle of Fallen Timbers. But the anger did not subside, and a new conflict began. In 1812, Tecumseh, chief of a Shawanan tribe, took advantage of a war between the United States and the United Kingdom over trade disputes to form a new coalition of 30 Native American nations against Washington. But once again, the native armies were crushed. In 1813, Tecumseh was killed at the Battle of Moraviantown, leading to the dissolution of the native coalition. After that, some peoples chose to join the American side in exchange for a promise of autonomy they would never obtain. And for the others, American policy was now clear. They had to move either to Canada or west of the Mississippi. The plan was simple: to create a reservation, i.e. an area where Native Americans could live freely, without interference from the outside world, and forbidden to leave. In any case, they weren't given much choice, and those who resisted were forcibly deported. This was the beginning of many revolts and wars. The first took place shortly after the defeat at Moraviantown. The Creeks, refusing to be moved west, revolted and attacked a military garrison commanded by a certain Andrew Jackson. The following year, Jackson took his revenge on the Creeks. Defeated, some of them found refuge with the Seminole people in Florida. But the majority were deported to the Western Indian Reservation. But for those who took refuge with the Seminoles, the peace was short-lived. In 1817, the U.S. government wanted to subdue them too, as they were settled on cotton reserves. Once again, Andrew Jackson was put to the task. He burned every Native American village he came across and parked the Seminoles in a reservation where the soil could not be cultivated. Many Seminoles die of disease and death. To survive, they had to pillage the surrounding area, triggering a second war with the Americans. But in the end, the Seminoles surrendered. Most were also deported to the Indian Territory to the west, and only a minority managed to stay in Florida, living in a micro-reservation in the Everglades, which still exists today. If you already find this kind of treatment atrocious, well, it's not over yet. The most terrible case is undoubtedly that of the Cherokees. Originally, the Cherokees were the most westernized of the American Indian nations. Having settled in Georgia, the Cherokees have not been nomads for some time. They dress like Westerners, have built roads, brick houses, schools, forges, ceria, and cotton weaving machines. They even have a constitution and a newspaper, the Cherokee Phoenix, which is published in both English and the Cherokee language. And they even have black slaves. In short, it's hard to blame them for not wanting to convert to the white way of life. And yet, they're still going to have trouble. Well, the trouble isn't really with them, but with the land they live on. The settlers have recently discovered gold. Unsurprisingly, the American settlers want to take over the Cherokee lands. And to do so, they had the support of the President of the United States, none other than Andrew Jackson. In 1830, he proposed a law that was passed by Congress, the Indian Removal Act, which was nothing less than the forced exclusion of the Cherokees into Indian territory. But for once, it didn't pass. Opposition to the act arose in Congress, which deemed it immoral, especially against a people considered peaceful and gradually civilizing, which for them was a good thing. In 1932, the U.S. Supreme Court even ruled the law illegal. But President Jackson told them that if they weren't happy, they could go to Georgia and prevent the expulsion of the Cherokees, which of course they wouldn't do. With no local support, the Cherokees were forced to sell their land to the settlers, who shared it out by lottery. In 1838, 17,000 men, women and children were forced to leave under pressure from the U.S. Army. They began a long journey to a reservation in Oklahoma. A third of the Cherokees died on this forced march, which they dubbed the Trail of Tears. This deportation law was soon extended by Congress to all peoples living between the coast and the Mississippi. The Indian Removal Act thus marked the end of the attempt at cohabitation between the United States and the native nations. In 1840, the situation was brutal. From the Mississippi to the East Coast, Native Americans had all but disappeared. All that remained were a few isolated tribes in the Appalachian Mountains, and a few others, notably mestizos, who were trying to integrate as best they could into American society. But for the vast majority who had been forced to migrate beyond the Mississippi River to the so-called Great Plains, if for a time they thought they had found a refuge from the colonists, this refuge soon turned into a trap. Soon, the colonists would launch expeditions westwards, paving the way for a new wave of migration. It was to be known as the Conquest of the West. Thank you for watching this part of the video. In the next chapters, we'll take a closer look at the conquest of the West and the Indian Wars that followed to try and understand the causes of the massacres and/or genocide, if any. So activate the notification bell to be notified of our next publications. Thank you and see you next time.